Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dandies, a podcast where each episode, two friends share a recommendation with one another. We talk about what we liked, what we would change, and try not to judge each other too much over our bad tastes. This week, we smell like l'air de panache.
Man, you nailed that one. You're a fancy boy.
It felt good. My feet planted. I stuck it.
Man, they don't call you a disc dandy for nothing.
I think we're the only ones who call each other disc dandies, but I'll take that.
Yeah, that's true. We need to get our viewership, our subscribership up before we can truly make jokes like that. Hey, Jordan, how's it going?
It's going good. We were just talking about before the podcast how I am having first world problems and beleaguering my lack of demon souls currently. Other than that, I'm making it by.
So this is my understanding of your dilemma, your a tragedy that's unfolding in your life right now. All you want to do is collect the demon souls. Like, that's all you want to do. You see a demon soul, you take it. Should have been watching it closely. But you can't because it's only on PS5 for the time being.
Yeah, see, instead of all these hot new games that are releasing, I just want to play a remastered version of a 10-year-old game. That's where my heart is.
I think that there's a lot of people that feel the same way about it as you do. I played a little bit of Demon Souls. It was actually kind of hard for me to get into. So, I don't have that much experience with it. But, I'm interested in playing it too as soon as it comes to PC, which hopefully will be soon. Hopefully it'll do like a Death Stranding and like come back to PC and let everyone play it.
Well, I understand why you'd have a hard time getting into it since you're a big baby.
Oh, hey. I just finished a very stressful semester at school, so I think that that's proof enough that I am no baby.
Proof is in the pudding. You didn't want to play Demon Souls. Like, my case rests.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, hey, it's welcome to Disc Dandies, everyone. Glad that you're here. We've got something really great to talk about this episode. But before we do that, I have a very important question for you, Jordan.
Hit me with it, and I want to be enlightened.
One of the cool things about this podcast is that, it's an opportunity for, Jordan and I, two friends, to kind of needle each other about things that we like and dislike and all that stuff. So I'm going to take full opportunity to do that with my question for this week. Jordan, I got to know, what is your favorite beverage for podcasting?
Right now, in front of me is a translucent container. It's called Purple Drink.
Oh, okay.
Okay, have you heard of this?
Oh, I've listened to a lot of hip hop. I know all about this.
Okay, well, as a purveyor of hip hop and someone who is very hip himself, I have mixed together a concoction consisting of cough syrup and grape soda.
Okay. That seems like it's not great for you. But I guess, how does it make you feel? How you feeling after you hit the lean?
Well, so here's the downside to this beverage. It's more of like a Purple Drink Light. I wasn't actually able to get the cough syrup.
Oh, okay. Hey, I get it, man. Times are tough in these unprecedented times. Sometimes you have to get by with what you have, right? So, how diminished your experience? How diminished would you say is your experience missing that some would say key ingredient?
Considering I'm missing both key ingredients for Purple Drink and am just drinking water right now, I would say that this is a pretty low experience. I'm missing all of the Purple Drink, but I honestly right now I'm happy to be here, man. I'm happy to be here talking to you. You tall glass of water.
Virtue through suffering. This is how it ought to be. But yeah, I totally understand you. I also have a beverage in front of me, my podcasting beverage of choice that is not making me happy at the moment. But luckily, I have my, as I've said before, prerequisite 1,024 different beverages in front of me so I can switch in between. That way, I'm not shackled down. I'm not limited in what I can consume while I have these very important and, dare I say it, fun conversations with you.
That was a lot, but I did not hear what your favorite beverage was in that.
So my favorite beverage for podcasting is coffee, and I'm not like a snob for coffee, but I just like making coffee in my coffee pot and just drinking it throughout the day. I like making decaf in the evening so I can have that like coffee taste, that experience of drinking a hot mug of coffee in the evening. So I when I'm here podcasting with you, I'm normally drinking some sort of coffee. Now, the thing is that I have a fresh mug of coffee in front of me, but I also have multiple mugs with varying levels of cold coffee that I've left sitting throughout the day, also on my desk, adding up to that prerequisite number. So, hot, cold, I've got it all.
So is your current cup of coffee full, would you say?
It's about half full.
So tell me, I actually don't know about the perishability time frame for coffee. If you dump the old low cups of coffee into one big cup of coffee and warm it up in the microwave, is it still okay to drink?
It doesn't matter whether it's safe to drink. What matters is, would I drink it? And absolutely I would.
Virtue through suffering.
There it is. See, you're finally getting it.
Okay, I got you. But what we both understand here is that you have problems with pooping, which is why you drink coffee after coffee, right?
I am a very broken individual, as this podcast sits as evidence too. So yes.
Your colon broke.
Let's leave it at that. Yeah.
Maybe I'm letting the cart get ahead of the horse here. But
you're killing two birds with one stone.
Yes, I'm doing that. I am putting 1 foot in two shoes.
Putting the stones before the horse.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Something we would both agree is not broke and varying degrees of woke, most definitely bespoke. Grand Budapest Hotel. My exhortation this last week. Would you say?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Hey, as we've talked about before, I'm not a huge movie guy. I am quite the anti-intellectual bumpkin when it comes to this stuff. And I'm glad that I have such a smart movie man, such as yourself, to help guide me through how I'm supposed to feel about this movie.
I would call myself a movie man, but not smart. I do appreciate the praise, though. Thank you, friend.
Yeah. This was actually a really interesting exhortation. So, it's definitely something that I hadn't experienced before, and something that I have a lot of fresh takes, as they say, about.
Okay, well, just for a little bit of background, hopefully we've all watched it going into this episode. The idea being that we go into each episode, hopefully having all experienced it as a group, so that we can have a fun spoiler-filled discussion like we're definitely going to have about this, so beware.
So I don't have the soundboard that I very much want to implement into this podcast. I don't have it yet, so I'm going to have to do the funny sounds with my mouth, but spoiler alert. Yeah, so as we talked about in other episodes, when we talk about a movie like this, we really have to talk about it as a complete thing. So if you haven't seen this movie, we probably will be delving deep into different spoiler aspects. So this is your warning that the entire episode's really going to be all spoilers.
All right, I'm a first big spoiler for Grand Budapest Hotel, directed by Wes Anderson.
Now, I know that he is a well-known director and has a certain style to the way that he directs. And this is the first time I've seen a Wes Anderson movie. So I can definitely see why people would say that about him.
That he's a spoiler?
Oh, no, that he's a famous director that has a certain style.
Oh, yes. Yeah, very much so. His style is, what is it, pastel, would you say?
I would definitely understand why people would use that term to describe his style. We'll talk about this a little bit more later, but his style definitely has sort of like a almost surreal, ethereal, like storytelling type of vibe.
Yeah. Okay. So just moving on to some more quick facts about the Grand Budapest Hotel before we move on. It stars Ralph Fiennes.
Let's go with whatever you decide.
Ralph Fiennes, which is what I would how I would pronounce it if I were reading it on a piece of paper. And I'm really sorry, Ralph, who is most certainly listening to this podcast, for butchering your name. He plays Gustav H., who works as I mean, he would probably be easily mistaken as the main protagonist for this movie, though his counterpart in the movie, Tony Revolori, plays the character Zero. We agree that he's the protagonist, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would say he's definitely more of the protagonist than Gustav H is. I mean, the story is about his experience and his interactions with this character.
Yeah. So this is definitely an ensemble cast, as most Wes Anderson movies are. You have various A-list to high B-list actors sprinkled in throughout the film in various background roles or primary roles. But part of the fun and maybe like the distraction is these actors are placed.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't know too much about Wes Anderson, but one thing that I do know about him, and I saw this in play in the movie, is that he's known for having like the same actors kind of come back to all of his movies and do these different roles. And these are like well-known actors. I mean, Bill Murray's probably, the highest profile one, but like Jeff Goldblum and Jason Schwartzman and, Owen Wilson. And so I was able to see these, actors who are very well-known in their own right play these like really out there characters. I understand that that's par for the course for a Wes Anderson movie.
You left off the biggest name, like a returning actor to our podcast, Willem Dafoe.
I didn't know if he was a part of that kind of acting, camaraderie that Wes Anderson has. But yeah, this is also has William Dafoe in it, and very well-known recurring character in the Dandies canon.
Yeah, I believe he's worked in 2 to 3 Wes Anderson films total. I don't have the IMDb page for either of them open right now, but I think that's about right. He was at least in one other movie, Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, but I think he may have had one other. But anyways,
right.
That's aside from the point. You want to get into some story stuff real quick?
First of all, in terms of the story, the hotel doesn't show up in the story all that much, does it? Like for it being called the Grand Budapest Hotel, they don't spend all that much time in the hotel, do they?
I think I guess metaphysically they are, because the story is being told inside the hotel, and then I think you're right. Like the most of the rising and falling action takes place outside of the hotel. Now that I think about it, I hadn't thought about it that way. Yeah, this'll
tie into when I more specifically talk about my gripes with the film, but I'll bring this back up. But I would love to get into the story of this movie.
Sure. Okay. So as I alluded to, this is a story within a story within a story, sort of. Basically, the movie starts out with a small girl arriving at a deceased author's mural, which I think this at this point is in the modern era. Whenever we go into the book from the perspective of the author, now deceased author, it's in the, I think, mid 80s or so, who then is telling us a story about his meeting with a hotel owner and, very rich person that took place about 40 years prior or 30 years prior, something like that in the 30s. Wait, no, I got that wrong, didn't I? It was in the 50s.
I'm not sure. I don't remember that being said. I'm sure it was said in the movie, but I didn't catch it.
Okay, well, it was like 30 or so years prior, I believe, where he had, as a younger adult man, he had a meeting with this hotel owner who then told him the story of how he came to own the hotel that the author was staying in, which itself took place another 20 to 40 years before this in the 30s. I'm probably butchering the time frame a little bit. but that kind of plot point is a bit of a gag in itself. The directorial style changes, as well as like the way the narrators are speaking about the story based on which layer you're in.
Yeah, the years don't matter too much. It's really more the eras. So don't get too caught up in that. But that meta narrative, the layers, does kind of lean into the themes of the story, and we'll talk about those a little bit later. But the bulk of the story is happening in the past, in the 30s, when the Grand Budapest Hotel was in its prime.
It's a point of the story, I think, that the hotel was more or less in its prime because of the man running it, Gustav H., played by Ralph Fiennes, and Zero, the character who we agree works as our protagonist here, is undergoing tutelage underneath Gustav, and kind of learning how the hotel biz works. And the two of them end up going on a misadventure when Gustav is left a very expensive painting by a hotel client who is mysteriously. Well, I guess she dies mysteriously. This leads to them needing to exonerate Gustav whenever he's sort of pinned to have murdered her.
Yeah, the story has a few twists and turns in it that kind of are a little, I mean, for lack of a better term, silly. And I think like the fact that this painting is like so important and so, it's so important to the story that it does seem a little bit silly, but it adds to kind of the storytelling tone of this, that it's very fancy on the surface and then kind of irreverent and kind of flippant beneath.
Can't allow you to call Boy with Apple silly on this podcast. It's a masterpiece.
I worked in a thrift store for a number of years. I gotta say, I've seen better.
Yeah, it's Boy with Apple is more or less just a kind of a MacGuffin. It's just there for the action to move forward. It could have been any expensive heirloom, though it is played for some really good gags throughout the movie.
Yeah, its placement and how it was used in the movie was very funny. But the main story, like there's a lot of things that happen that kind of move the plot forward, but the main story is the relationship between Gustav, the concierge who runs the Grand Budapest, and Zero, the brand new lobby boy, who is brand new but eager to learn and just wants to do the best that he can. And their relationship, as it unfolds from a relationship of just a hard-nosed boss to someone who knows nothing about their job, to almost brotherhood, to the point where they're emulating one another.
Sure. So Will, at that point, I think we're at the point where I want to know what you thought about it. This podcast is all about us forcing each other to partake in our interests. And I want to hear how much you loved this movie.
I liked it more than I thought I was going to going into it. When the movie ended, I was a little unsure about how I felt about it. But after just having some preliminary conversation with you, I think that I came to a point where I enjoy the movie for what it is. It definitely set out to do something, and it did that, and did it in the style that the director, is known for and wanted to put out there. So, I won't say it's my favorite movie of all time, but I liked it, and I thought it was good.
More of a respect it for what it is type take, yeah.
Exactly. Like I would have been fine if I had never seen this movie. This did, it didn't make that much of an impression on me, but it's good for the world that something like this exists. So
let's move on to style and talk about Wes Anderson's approach here. We kind of alluded to it earlier when we were talking about the director. He's got kind of a deadpan, moderate approach to directing his films, would you say?
Yeah, I would say that. It's colorful, but muted colorful. Well, let me just go ahead and say, like when I was watching this movie with no background experience about this director, the word that kept coming to my mind is storybook. Like this is very much like presented as if you're like seeing a story in the storybook, like very flat things that are moving, a very flat backgrounds. Once we get into the main time period of the 30s, things are very like brilliantly colored, like you see in a picture book. And then all of the shots, like the very centered person is facing straight, everything's symmetrical, nothing like too off kilter or anything like that. Yeah, it just really seemed like you were like being presented with a storybook, and I felt that really fit in well with the meta narrative that like what we're hearing is a book that was written about Zero when he was an old man and running the Grand Budapest at the end of his life. So a storybook's the word that I kept coming back to over and over again to describe the style of the story.
Yeah, and on from like a meta perspective as well, this is kind of an approach that Wes Anderson has for all of his films, like the centered shots and kind of like storybook approach to like filmmaking. His films, despite being about, in most cases, being about like real people experiencing like some level of real world adversity, are framed in a kind of magical, like otherworldly kind of viewpoint, like everything seems very like almost like a stage set as opposed to a movie set, like what you would expect to see if you were to go to watch a Broadway show or something, like very, very put together. You can almost see the strings hanging from everything type thing. It seems very fabricated in a very intentional way.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And even the presentation of, the Grand Budapest with it, being very lavish and extravagant, compared with Gustav's personality, which is very like composed, flamboyant's not the word I want to use, but very like
I think flamboyant's a good word.
I don't mean that in the sense of like his mannerisms, but in the sense that he's a very classy, like stylish man that presents himself in that way. Like he is just the epitome of like classy concierge, like knows exactly like what like the social, like fancy social rules are, and like very much that space. It does seem kind of like a veneer style. And one of my favorite parts of this movie are when Gustav kind of breaks that, when he's like, speaking in his normal cadence, and then he's like, oh, fuck it, or something like that. And you kind of see that behind the scenes. I think that matches perfectly with what you were just saying about it being, very like having that layer of style on it.
Oh yeah, he's definitely a man of presentation. Though we see in like one scene, he does a really good job reminding us of his like real world knowledge. Whenever he's in prison, he drops one of my favorite lines in the whole movie, which is, in places like this, one can't be a candy ass.
yeah, that's definitely puts a point on it for sure.
Yeah. One more thing I wanted to like talk about. We talked about this a little bit in a discussion previously. A fun thing that Wes Anderson does that I thought was used pretty well here is like sort of a stop motion Christmas special like style to animate certain scenes. The ones that come to mind as like Zero kind of running across the rooftops after he's leaving his girlfriend Agatha's house. Agatha played by Saoirse Ronan. And then like whenever Gustav and his fellow prison mates are escaping prison, you kind of get like some shadow work of them moving across the prison guards like bunks and stuff, where it's very clearly like not real legs moving. There's just like a lot of like fun stylistic takes and shots that seem very very animated.
Yeah, it definitely heightens that storybook feel that the director is going for. Like it's all live action, but they can go in and post with CGI, I'm sure, but they can take something that we know to be live action but turn it almost into an animation, like and kind of heightening that storybook presentation.
Sure. Okay, well, yeah, you want to talk some themes?
Yeah. I think that this story, and I think this is where my appreciation for the story kind of perks up after, you sit and think about the movie for a little bit and what it's trying to say, like the main message inside the story, is where I really get a lot of my appreciation from it. So I'm ready to get into these themes.
Sure. Okay, so I think the main or like one of the most prominent themes that I want to kind of go over requires some background. On the surface level, this is a movie I think you can, show to a casual moviegoer and they can enjoy and find, fun and funny. It's not something that you need to be a movie buff to appreciate.
Yeah, that's me. That's me. I'm the casual moviegoer.
Yeah, and like we got that from Will. Like he watched it and enjoyed it. If you look beneath the surface and look at the director's background, he's faced some amount of adversity as far as criticism goes. Whenever he was going in to shoot Moonrise Kingdom, which was his previous film before Grand Budapest, he had faced a lot of criticism about his kind of samey directorial style. The perfectly centered shots, the pastel colors, just basically they were saying, oh, the guy's kind of fallen into a rhythm, and he's like kind of become a trope on his own. And he tried to use some more traditional directing techniques with Moonrise Kingdom. It wasn't across the board. You still had your like kind of general Wes Anderson isms. It was still very much a Wes Anderson movie. But there were many shots and directorial decisions that were very much in keeping with traditional filmmaking, which he then got in turn got criticized again for by another group of critics. So kind of in the run up to this movie, he made the decision that he was just going to go full Wes Anderson. This is a Wes Anderson movie. And he kind of pulls out all the stops. This is not a movie you will show to someone who is a Wes Anderson detractor that already does not like the director with expectations that they'll like it, because this is him at his peak in terms of his directorial style. And go ahead.
That makes a lot of sense. This does not look like anything that I've seen before, and I haven't seen a lot of movies, and I haven't seen, like I said, this is the first Wes Anderson movie that I've seen. So, I don't have any background to compare any of this to. And I can, like I mentioned before, I can see what his style is and why people say what they say about his movies from this one. It seems like this was a good one for me to start out, with his movies. So now I know exactly what kind of style I'm going to be looking for or can expect from his other projects. And so, it's like if this is, him in his element doing the style that he wants to do, I definitely think he did a good job pulling it off.
It's very loud in that regard. Like, it's something that he actually ties into the story too, mostly through Gustav H. Being the runner, being the concierge and kind of manager of this hotel. Like, he does not own the hotel, he runs it. But his position at this hotel is very similar to Wes Anderson in his movies, which is like, hey, I'm running this very big, expensive show. Ultimately, I'm a creative who has a mind for this thing. I would argue that one of the points that the story is trying to make is that art is not just something you can kind of crank out and something that, anyone can do. No one can just go and make the Grand Budapest Hotel. It's the person behind the art that gives it its flavor. And that's kind of echoed by Zero whenever, in the modern era where we're seeing, or I guess in that later on, whenever we're with the older, or with the protagonist speaking to Zero, the hotel has largely fallen into shambles. And it kind of started to do that after Gustav left. And Gustav as a person drew people into the hotel with his personality, despite behind closed doors being a bit of he wasn't really living the most extravagant of lives, living in much and something not much better than a broom closet.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. One of my favorite like style things about this movie is at the beginning when you see the Grand Budapest in the shape that it's in when the writer comes and talks with adult Zero is very clearly not the same building as the former glory of the Grand Budapest. Like surely in the story it is the same building, but it's very clearly like super drab. It's very like brick brown with that kind of late 70s aesthetic, like poor lighting and all that stuff. And it's a very metaphorical way to see how this building like has changed for the worse since the main time of the story.
I like that you point that out because that kind of ties into another very prominent theme in this movie, which is the romanticization of the best points of our lives, or like, however brief that might be. It's sort of a nostalgia piece in that Zero is looking back to the best part of his life, even though it was faced with a lot of adversity and challenges, that the movie we kind of experienced with him through the movie. But despite those challenges, he had Agatha, his wife, and Gustav, his good friend. And he looks back on that period of his life as one of the best, even though it was, kind of traumatic in some ways. That's just something we kind of see repeated throughout the movie as well. Gustav is kind of seen by Zero as being a very nostalgic person, someone being born out of his time. It's kind of a piece on sentimentality in that way.
Yeah. I think what I was talking about just a bit ago with the building, like clearly looking far, far different in the past than it does in the 80s when the story was written. What we remember and what we take from the past is, a lot different than how the past actually was. And the meta narrative of this story really hammers that home. Another like detail that I really loved is that at the very beginning end of the story, when the young girl is at the cemetery reading the book that the author wrote at his grave, you've seen this before when people, die, and at cemeteries, they'll leave little tokens of sentimentality there, in reverence to the person. And in the story, people had left keys, like hotel keys or any kind of key, onto the story's author, even though all he did was tell somebody else a story. So I think that's a good way to look at how we perceive previous eras, that people are putting that onto the author instead of Zero where it really belongs.
And I believe you had a point that you wanted to make as well about a theme that you picked up on.
Yeah. So, touching upon that, the effect that our environment has on ourselves and the people around us. Like we mentioned, the story really follows Gustav and Zero, when Zero is a young man, and Gustav is like kind of teaching him how, the ways that he sees the world and, getting into all these hijinks. Zero kind of starts out as a blank slate, is just starting, listening intently to everything Gustav tells him, even though Gustav is like doing all these like crazy, ridiculous things. As the movie progresses, we start to see Zero really emulating Gustav and then kind of becoming the same person in a way. He starts reciting the ridiculous romantic poetry, starts wearing that, super smelly perfume that Gustav is known for. He really starts being molded into the shape of Gustav. When Zero is an older man and owns the Grand Budapest, the author, I would say rightfully assumes that, he's hanging on to the memory of Gustav. And he says that he's not. It's actually for his wife and infant daughter that, died. The infant daughter died very young and, about the same time that the mother did. And he says that that's why he's hanging on to the Grand Budapest. So I think this movie says a lot about how our environments and the people that we're around shape us and how that carries us into the future.
I really love how neatly these themes kind of work together too. The romanticization of those best points being tied to the people that had those influences on us. I think that those are very well connected in this movie, and it was It's a weird point to make, but it's something that like I wish I had thought of when we talked about this previously. But it's very effortless, you know. The movie feels effortless in a lot of ways. Even whenever we get into like one of the more bloated acts in the movie, it all still feels like it knows what it's doing, but we're just kind of along for the ride.
Yeah, I definitely, it's definitely something that grew on me after I finished the movie and spent some time kind of thinking about what it was trying to do. It really elevated the way I was thinking about it past, the time where I stopped watching the movie.
Yeah. Okay. So, Will, I think this is a good time for you to talk about your gripes. Lay them out on the table. Pull your heart out of your chest so I can examine it and determine its worthiness.
Yeah. The style, we've talked a lot about the style. I think that there was a certain point where that kind of started to wear a little thin on me. There is a point in the movie, and I'd say it would be between the where they escape the prison and then when they come back to the Grand Budapest and it's filled with, it's not Germany, but it's like it's a fictional country, but it's supposed to be the SS has come and taken over the Grand Budapest. In between those two spots, I really felt that the story kind of dragged a little bit, and I have to say that my attention span sort of waned in between those 2 points. And I do think maybe it was a bit of overload on the style and presentation. So I don't know if you feel that same way, if there's like a place where it lulls, but it definitely did for me.
No, I totally agree with that, and I think it's definitely. I think I would attribute it less to the style and more to the fact that they had kind of written themselves into a corner as far as like needing to get all of the characters in one spot. So, which is the monastery that they were trying to find the butler who was trying to help Gustav at the beginning of the movie with the painting. Basically, Gustav and Zero are attempting to find this butler so that they can exonerate Gustav.
Yeah.
But they also need to get Willem Dafoe's character, whose name is escaping my mind right now, but they need to get him there as well because he's also pursuing the butler because, he wants to, cut the informant off, kill him so that he can't, exonerate Gustav because they're trying to get the painting for themselves. But they also, at that same time, need to get the police, who is headed up by Edward Norton's character, at the same location. And I think a lot of the awkwardness and kind of lowliness of that part of the movie is due to the fact that they're moving all the pieces around and try to get them all into the same place. And it gets a little heavy in that part. Once they get them there, and, we have the chase scene through the mountains, and then we eventually make it back to the Budapest Hotel for I would say for the finale of the movie. The action picks back up and takes off because the work had been done. But I think that work being done did take a little bit of a toll during that part of the movie, for sure.
I'm sure there are people that this section of the movie was like really awesome and they really liked it and it kept their attention. But for me, it was just a little too much. There's one other thing that I felt kind of took away from the movie, and this is also another thing that I know people love about it, is that there are a lot of big name actors in this movie whose portrayals I really liked, but the fact that they were so well known and kind of their own presentation was a little bit campy, that they kind of stood out a little bit, and I feel it was a bit of a taking away from the story. Like Jeff Goldblum's character, who I actually really liked his place in the story, and his vocal affectation, like his dialogue that he was saying, I thought was really hilarious. But it was just Jeff Goldblum in his normal Jeff Goldblum voice, and it stuck out. It kind of took me out of it a little bit. Willem Dafoe did a great job. Edward Norton, I think, is the worst offender of this. I did not enjoy him in this movie at all. The character was fine, but just like I could not see him as an SS-like character. He just kind of stood out a little too much for both the time period and the cultural the culture that they were trying to go for in that time period.
Yeah, he was just Edward Norton in that movie for sure.
Yeah.
You could tell other actors in the movie tried to despite there being, or they tried to be not themselves in the movie, despite still standing out a little bit. But Tilda Swinton and Bill Murray are the ones that come to mind immediately. Like Bill Murray's put on a bit of a, like a slightly regal accent, but it's also in his like mannerisms and stuff that you could tell he's trying to put on a performance.
Yeah.
Tilda Swinton is heavily covered in makeup and doesn't really tip her hand at all that she's Tilda Swinton in the movie. Yeah, that's one of my favorite things is when you point out like, oh, that's Tilda Swinton, and people are all like, what, really? Like, because they did a really good job of masking that for her role. And also the fact that they played her for gags and just kind of used her for a bunch of dead picture shots for most of the movie. Then you have like Edward Norton and Jeff Goldblum, like you pointed out, that they're kind of just being themselves. Which is where I think these cameos can get really distracting. They can kind of take away from the movie in that you're like, oh, I'm just watching actors right now.
It's a real shame that Bill Murray's like big part in this movie is smack dab in the middle of that lull that I kind of started losing interest in the story, because I really wish that he'd that his part had been a bit more exciting. But I understand that's not really what that character was trying to do. Like Willem Dafoe, even though he did kind of stick out a little bit, like his character was so over the top that it almost made sense for him to kind of stick out like a sore thumb all the rest of the movie. But Edward Norton is definitely the biggest offender here. But other than these two things, I really enjoy what this movie did. I'm glad that I had some time to kind of think about it and discuss some things with you before we did this episode, because my opinion of it really has kind of gone up the more I analyze this movie.
All criticisms and stuff like that aside, I do think that this is a movie that is very positive in its outlook on people, and it has positive things to say about our relationships with people. Like, this is going to sound a little cheesy, but I think the core thesis of this movie really is just like people giving meaning to our lives in a way. The Zero's reminiscence, like as far as like Gustav and Agatha go, is that they were like some of the most precious people in his life, and they made him happy. And even though things aren't as great as they were then, they kind of gave him something to, they gave him value, And I think that that's something I really appreciate whenever watching this movie. Is it makes me feel good about the things I'm experiencing, and I hope that other people come away with that when they watch it as well. It's just a very positive film.
I like The Lighthouse more.
No, you don't. You're lying.
In the Willem Dafoe Willem Dafoe / Dandies power ranking of movies, I am going to put The Lighthouse above this one, but just barely.
Well, I think I would agree that I do appreciate Willem Dafoe's performance more in the last in our last film exhortation. That character is still one of my favorites of all time, so I don't fault you for that. So, how about some quick hits here?
Okay, I'm ready. Hit me, Daddy.
There's a lot of really vibrant, bright characters in this movie. So I would understand if there are some competing for the top slot. But who would you say your favorite character is and why?
I mentioned it before, but Jeff Goldblum, his character is the one that kind of stuck out the most to me. And I really enjoyed his dialogue. I kind of wish I had gotten a little bit more of him, and kind of wish he had done a little extra, not Jeff Goldblum type voice. But like his character is the one that I enjoyed seeing on screen most. And that scene where he gets his fingers chopped off with the door, I still kind of wince thinking about that.
It was a very funny scene despite how disturbing it was.
Yeah, for sure. Out of like the main characters, I really liked Zero, like as a young man. I felt that his portrayal was very good, and it's a real shame that he kind of got overshadowed by Gustav's actor. The actor that played Zero really should have kind of been put more front and center with this movie.
Whenever you Google this movie, if you Google Grand Budapest Hotel cast, you'll find Zero pretty far down on the casting list as far as Tony Revolori, his actor, goes, which is crazy to me because he was like a standout performance in this movie. I thought he was hilarious. He was very like down to earth and relatable, and I love him for that. He's definitely really far up there for me. but I do think that the main reason why he gets overshadowed, even though I think it's kind of unjust, is that Ralph Fiennes really did have an incredible performance as Gustav. He was as much of a scumbag as you can be while still being very likable. He played, even in his most detestable moments, mainly like whenever he was deriding Zero for not bringing his L'air de Panache after he escaped from prison. Yeah, even in that moment, whenever he rebounded and was like, "I am so sorry, Zero," he was very good at making that detestable character really lovable and someone that you could root for.
Yeah, he definitely put forward a great performance. But let me flip it around. Who is your favorite character in this movie?
Oh, that Gustav, for sure.
Yeah.
That was more or less my justification for that. I think I want to take a note from, or like a leaf from your book, and point out Jopling, Willem Dafoe's character, as another favorite. Your point about how like he stood out a little bit, but he really worked, actually got my kind of wheel spinning, and I thought, I do think that he adds a lot of the teeth to this movie. He has a very threatening performance, and he's actually kind of scary. And most of the violent acts that are enacted in this movie are at his hands. But his performance is also kind of goofy, despite being scary.
Did you just throw my cat?
Exactly. Did he just throw my cat out the window?
Yep. And then the pan down.
Yeah, a very clearly prosthetic cat laying on the ground or some kind of puppet. It was very good. The humor between Jeff Goldblum and Willem Dafoe was really good in general in this movie, because the same scene that made you wince where his fingers got cut off, it is very brutal, but it also made me laugh because, we hear the scream behind the closed door and it's just so animated.
Yeah.
We need like a spin-off movie with Jopling and Kovacs. That's it.
Kovacs. Let me go ahead and hit you real quick. So this movie has a lot of humorous moments in it, but they're very it's very deadpan compared to the rest of the presentation style. So did the humor of this movie work for you? Do you think it was in service of the themes and style?
I do, for sure. Like we talked about in the last bit, I think this movie has a very like quirky sense of humor, as most Wes Anderson movies have. But it goes between dark and hilarious effortlessly. And I think that the reason why this movie works the way it does is because it's able to undercut all of the violence and darkness with just really good self-aware humor. Like you pointed out earlier, that Gustav will take a moment to like undercut his pretentiousness with just like an fuck or something like that.
Yeah.
Like he'll break his own ice, and I think it's a very nice touch and something that the movie kind of has as a tone in general.
I actually really like the humor of this movie too. I thought, those moments with Gustav definitely were good, and that kind of deadpan presentation was really good for the themes that this movie was putting forward.
Sure. Okay. I'm gonna button up these questions with a really pretentious one. If you're ready for some deep conversation, mainly it's just me going to be ranting most likely.
Oh, I want to hear it. Go ahead. Be as pretentious as you want.
Okay, so in the modern era of filmmaking, how do you feel about this film existing? And I guess to add context to this question, I mean, among all the big budgets, some are blockbusters that are just kind of the norm, and that aren't even really just being released in the summer anymore. But the big, I mean, really, you could just look to stuff like the Avengers or whatever the big Disney release is that year, where it's less films being made by artists and more films being made by what do you call it? By the board, I guess you could say.
Sure, like corporate movies.
Yeah, I mean, we do love those movies. I'm not here to say that they're not good, but like, obviously, this is not one of those. What are your thoughts on this?
I'm going to make you do a little research. I'm going to make you do a little emotional research labor on this. When this movie came out, I think it was 2014. Is that correct?
Yes, somewhere in there.
How was this movie perceived by the general audiences of those times? I am led to believe that this movie, was really well received when it first came out. But like, what was the extent of that?
People really liked it. I can't remember. I don't know if there was any amount of awards buzz or anything like that. generally remember it being really well received whenever it came out. I think a lot of people praised him for just kind of leaning into leaning into his Wes Andersonisms. And I know audiences pretty generally enjoyed it because it's just a funny, ridiculous movie.
But it wasn't like the Avengers, right?
It would never have. No, it did not have the box office returns that something like the Avengers had. No, it's not. I don't think it was this. It was a profitable movie. It did well, but it's not going to make the billion that Avengers would see.
Right. I feel very ill-equipped to answer this question. I like I said, I'm not a movie person. This is not really something I pay a lot of attention to. I just want to watch anime, if we're being completely honest. But I will say, what I can say about this is that people like those kind of corporate movies for a reason. Like, there's a reason that Avengers is as popular as it is. Like, people want that kind of storytelling. But I think that with this movie, Wes Anderson has proven that he can enact his artistic vision and it be something that the majority of people who think about movies and want to go see movies also enjoyed. I don't see why there can't be room for both. Like obviously the industry should exist in a way to where both can exist, where there is room for Wes Anderson and other kind of artistic directors to do what they're doing and then not have to be an Avengers for it to justify its own existence. So that's really all that I can say about this, is that this is a great movie. I'm glad that Wes Anderson was able to make it the way he wanted to. And I hope that the industry continues to allow movies like this to exist and be out there and do well.
Yeah, so I largely agree with your points about both being able to exist, because I do like going and seeing whatever the new Marvel movie is, or whatever the new big Pixar movie is, whatever the big budget meant to make billions movie is. I'm all for watching those, because I do love a bunch of those movies. But I think what we're seeing in the film industry right now is a huge shift in favor of those things, and a big shift away from smaller movies like this. Mostly movies like The Lighthouse and Grand Budapest Hotel and many other really good smaller budget character driven movies are kind of passed over for the big budget Marvel films these days. And it's harder to get a movie that is like this, that isn't meant to just get money, where money isn't its primary focus,
Yeah.
And for me, I'm a big fan of movies like When Harry Met Sally, for example, where there are really well written characters interacting with each other and developing that, and it's typically over mundane things, like sort of a slice of life type thing. We saw a lot of that in the 90s and even the early 2000s to a certain extent, though it started to wane with the popularity of superhero films. I think how I feel is that I do want both to exist. I just do wish we had more of these, because I feel like they're kind of at a bad deficit right now.
Yeah.
But yes, I largely agree with what your point is. I appreciate this movie's existence, though, because it is a nice break away from what we're being given in the current era.
Yeah, and it seems like this has done well enough. I don't know what Wes Anderson has done after this movie. I think he's done a little bit since this came out, since it's not that old a movie. But hopefully he can just continue to kind of reiterate on the style and keep doing what he feels he needs to do as an artistic director.
Yeah, I think he's got the blank check at this point, to steal a term from another equally popular podcast. He's basically at a point where he can kind of make whatever he wants to make. I just wish that was I just wish there were more creatives like him that had that opportunity as well. But I guess that kind of buttons up my thoughts on that.
Yeah. It would be great if the doors were open for more people to do this and different stuff. Yeah.
So, well, I think that about does it for Grand Budapest Hotel. Thanks for letting me exhort you.
Oh, yes. Thank you for the exhortation. I feel like my horizons have been expanded by experiencing this. So, I'm glad that we have this to where you can help me expand my horizons. So thank you for the exhortation. But I have a banging exhortation for next episode that I am super excited to give you.
Bang me, daddy?
Oh, no. But we'll roll with it. Okay. My exhortation for next episode is the absolute classic PlayStation 1 game, Jade Cocoon.
The ultra popular Pokemon killer Jade Cocoon.
Something like that. So to call Jade Cocoon a Pokemon clone, I think does the game a disservice. But you do have to admit that this game is a part of that Pokemon clone boom of the late 90s. It plays much more like a serious JRPG, though, very serious themes, serious presentation. And it has both character designs and original animation by Studio Ghibli.
See, that's exciting to me. I'm a huge, as most people are, a big Ghibli fan, and I did not know. I know there was like Ni no Kuni, which released a few years ago, that Studio Ghibli had been involved with, but I did not know that in the PS1 era that Ghibli was involved with video games in any capacity. That's exciting.
Yeah, this game is not like people know about this game, but it wasn't like a huge hit or anything, or at least not over here outside of Japan. So, but I remember playing this game when I was a kid. It really made an impression on me. It is very Pokemon-ish. Its main gimmick is like merging the monsters, the minions, and I want to see how you feel about this game.
Oh, so it's just Persona.
I don't know anything about that, but yes. So that is my exhortation. We'll get together on how we're going to play this later, but so I guess it's going to move us to our back matter. So I know that you've just been movies, ever since our last episode. But what other than watching this movie have you been getting into since the last time we spoke?
So my free time is largely being filled with, like right now, Cyberpunk just released. So I'm checking out Cyberpunk 2077. I don't know if this is any sort of hint for future exhortation at this point. I don't know if we're both going to end up playing this or how deep we're going to get into it, but I'm checking it out right now. I don't really have any takeaways that I could offer, just that it is being played at the moment. But up to this point, because it just released yesterday, up to Cyberpunk's release, I was playing Mordhau. It's a medieval, I guess, kind of technical combat multiplayer game.
Man, you and those medieval games, you have a real problem.
I do have a real problem. I've played and beaten Dark Souls and Dark Souls 3 in the last couple of weeks as well. I'm just, I really love the hard medieval combat games. They're fun. It's just my niche, man.
Sure. Yeah. Are you enjoying it?
Oh yeah, I'm enjoying it a lot. You being a weeb and me being I guess a Euro weeb. This is right up my alley, and the community is not great. I'll go ahead and say they have a lot of work to do, and honestly, I think they're what's holding this game back from being more popular than it is currently. But I do hope that the developers crack down on them and make it so that this game can actually grow, because I think it has a lot of strengths that would appeal to gamers, because it's just very well designed, very much up in the Siege alley, surprisingly, in terms of strategy, but. Rainbow Six Siege, to clarify, but if a game like Rainbow Six Siege can be successful, I think something like this could be too.
Yeah. That sounds like a lot of fun. I do want to. I'm also exhorting you to give us updates on your Cyberpunk experience down the road, as much as you feel comfortable to do so.
Yeah, I will do my best. I know there's a lot of discourse surrounding the game right now, and I'm just trying to work my way through those weeds. I think I've enjoyed what I've played so far of it. It's definitely like a technical, technically big, but I haven't worked out my thoughts much more past that. What about you, Will? How deep? What are you up to?
Well, I think I mentioned this earlier, but I just finished my fall semester for school, so I have tons of free time. I've been playing Magic Arena as I always do, playing a lot of Brawl on there. I have been getting into actually building a Gundam. Back a couple of months ago for my birthday, you got me a Gundam that has been on my shelf for months at this time, and I'm finally cracking it open and putting it together. And it's slow going, but that's my major project that I've been working on, and what I'm going to fill my winter break time with.
That's awesome, and I'm excited to see the finished product. I want those progress pics.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that. Maybe we could share something on the Disc Dandies Pod Twitter. How about that?
Oh, that sounds great. I guess though, before we move on from this, are you checking out Cyberpunk at all? Will you be?
That is to be determined. I think that's all I want to leave it at that.
Okay.
I think that now's a good time for our loyal listeners out there. I think I mentioned this on the last episode, but just want to let you all know the Disc Dandies YouTube channel is up and running. So far, all of our episodes are up on there with some sweet graphics and screenshots by yours truly. It's a great place to get caught up on our episodes. New ones will be posted as soon as our episodes come out. And, not saying anything's going to happen in the future, but if something were to happen in the future, the YouTube channel would be a great place to look out for any extra Disc Dandies fun. So, please go give us a, subscribe, hit the bell icon so you get notifications, do everything social to, keep up with us and what we're doing. And we'd love to have you along for the ride.
Yes, comment as well. Tell us how much you enjoy or don't enjoy the things that we're talking about. Give us your opinions. We want to have a conversation about these things for sure, and we'd love to hear everyone's thoughts.
Oh yeah, it'd be really cool if everyone could join in on the exhortations and start a discussion. Let us know what they thought about the thing that we're going to be talking about. Maybe we can incorporate that. There's all sorts of different things we could do. We just want to hear your voice and let us know what you think about what we're doing. So please do everything social you can to get in contact with us and to share how you feel about what we're doing. Get subscribed, all that stuff. It's going to be a good time moving forward.
Sure thing. All right, well, you want to close this thing up?
Yeah, let's go ahead and put a fork in this one. I think it's crispy. Thank you for listening to this episode of Disc Dandies. We very much appreciate you being a part of this every episode. You can follow Jordan on Twitter at Action Pancake. I'm at Aggro Rhetoric on Twitter. We'd love it if you could follow along with our exhortations, stay up to date on all the latest Disc Dandies excitement at Disc Dandies Pod. Hope you join us here next episode for another spin with the Disc Dandies.
See ya.
All right, so here's the thing. I'm having beverage woes real bad today. I was going to tell you this earlier. This was the thing I was waiting to tell you. So I always have coffee in the morning. It's nice. I like to put milk in it. So no sugar, no cream or anything like that. Just maybe a little less than a fourth of milk, and then the rest of the mug, coffee. But like I said, we desperately need to go to the grocery store. There's no milk, but what we do have is my girlfriend's sugar-free peppermint creamer, and now it is name brand, so it's nice. But I'm trying it in my coffee, and it's just not the same. It doesn't give me that coffee boost that I'm used to. The kind of perks up my taste buds. This is something completely different. And when I tried to eat my peanut butter sandwich, I like to have, a peanut butter sandwich with coffee. That's a good pairing for me. But I took a bite of the peanut butter sandwich and then immediately tried to wash it down with some coffee, forgetting that the coffee was a sugar-free peppermint mess. And it was not a good time in my mouth with the taste buds.
But that's what you go for when you eat your peanut butter sandwiches, right? You don't like to be happy.
I've said this before on the podcast. I want to reiterate, it's not about being happy or enjoying yourself. It's about virtue through suffering.
So whenever you drink the coffee mess with your peanut butter sandwich, you're like a mission accomplished.
Yeah. I feel a bit closer to being a quote unquote good person, as the ancient philosophers would say.